Today, I'm talking about why some six sensories succeed in their relationships with five sensories and in business, and why others fail. So, why do six sensories succeed in business, relate better to five sensories, while others are kind of marginalized and called crazy from the sidelines? Why do some really make it big and others don't do so well? The first reason why six sensories don't succeed in their business or in their relationships is that they don't mind their own business. So being sensitive and being empathic, or some people might go as far as being psychic or reading the spiritual realm, when you have those talents or abilities, or you're just really good at reading other people's emotions, what can happen sometimes is you develop really poor boundaries. This is why not everybody has this talent in life, and not everybody develops their empathy. As important as it is and valuable as it is as a human quality, not everybody develops it because it's easier for them to maintain their relationships without that quality of empathy. Because what empathy invites is that you're feeling the feelings of other people. You're bringing it all in. And you can get to a point where you don't mind the business of other people. So when you don't mind the business of other people, what you could be doing is something like stalking them on social media. This is a very obvious example, but five sensories like to behave provocatively on social media. And then six sensories may look at their content and see that they're commenting on somebody else's picture. And if they're dating, for example, it could be that they're jealous of the other person that the five sensory is commenting on. Maybe they're saying they're very beautiful, or they're liking their pictures. Could be something like that, or it could be something more obvious where the five sensory is kind of doing a prank text to the six sensory partner where they're like, okay, she's gone, babe, you can come over. I've talked about that prank before, but five sensories have a lot of different tricks to try to make six sensories feel insecure. And nicer ones don't do this. But unfortunately, these kind of trick behaviors are becoming more common because it's a type of test. They're testing empaths to see how good are your boundaries. Are you going to go crazy if they send something provocative, or are you going to maintain your inner peace? And it's like challenging your integrity as a sixth sensory. Are you really walking your talk? Are you really following the things that you teach or the things that you subscribe to from other teachers? And so if you don't lose your cool, if you see those tests for what they are, and you relax and you don't get angry with the five sensory, you just leave them alone and focus on your own priorities in your business, or your own priorities at home, or wherever you're working to achieve your goals in whatever area of life. And there's no right or wrong there, as long as you have something that's driving you and allowing you to serve the planet, then you are winning the game that the five sensory has put out there. They're trying to trigger you. And media can do the same thing. If you're a popular businesswoman or a businessman and you put out something on social media and you get flack for it and you get criticized, it's kind of the same test. It really matters how you respond. You don't want to cry at this point, although it's possible that you may cry in private, because sometimes the things people say in media can be horrible and trolls can be terrible, but you never want to show that emotion in front of the five sensory. You always want to be calm, regardless of whatever they throw at you. And the six sensories who stay calm in the face of these challenges that different five sensories can put before you are the ones that are going to win in their relationships with five sensories. They're the ones that are going to win in business, and those are the ones that make it big, versus the ones who are kind of pushed off to the side and made fun of and called crazy. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with being, a little bit out there, actually. Many popular intuitive people do put very controversial opinions online, and that's not necessarily gonna make you crazy. What's gonna make you crazy is responding to all the five sensories challenging you. So whatever you put out there, the crazier it is, the more viral it may go, but you have to be ready for the response back from people who are going to criticize you. And if you're not ready for that, or you're not ready for the provocative behavior of 5 sensories who are trying to make you jealous or emotional in some way, then you're probably not there yet in being ready to have a public presence. You may have to work on your personal relationships first. And actually, I believe that we do get the most challenged as 6 sensories in our personal relationships, even if we do succeed in business. Usually the business side is a little easier than our personal relationships. That's where we can get hit really hard, because that's a vulnerable side of our empathy and our personality. But if you're aware of the tactics and what 5 sensories are trying to do, and you're immune to them, you've been snake bitten and you've developed that immunity from being bitten so many times and you don't react, then you're going to do well as a 6 sensory. You don't want to flatter 5 sensories too much. We're actually taught in school to go after approval and really be good to the teachers, like bring them apples. But then, those kids always get called kiss butts behind their back, And there's a certain truth about that. It's not just bullies that are being bullies when those types of things happen. When we're trying too hard as 6 sensories to chase approval from 5 sensories, and they could be television executives, they could be writers, they could be people who are social media moguls or your social media team. It doesn't matter who they are, but if you're trying too hard to seek their approval, I'm not talking about just ignoring their advice if they're giving constructive advice, but you're trying way too hard to please them. Or if the 5 sensory is a partner and you're trying too hard to wear the sexy lingerie or do acrobatic moves. And I like acrobatics, for fun as my hobbies, but you shouldn't be using them to try to please people. It should be a hobby that brings you joy rather than something you do to please others or impress others. Whatever you enjoy doing in your spare time should feed your spirit, not be there to win the approval of someone else. And you could be doing that unconsciously, so you really need to be aware and ask yourself, what are my motivations for what I'm doing today? What are my motivations for my work? What's my intention? What's my intention behind my hobbies? Who am I trying to please? Am I trying too hard to be sexy in my personal life when really that's just not necessary? Or am I trying too hard to really cold call and market and hit the approval of other people and get their attention 7 times? There's nothing wrong with marketing, but if it's coming from the wrong energy and there's an air of desperation about it, and you seem like you're trying too hard to get other people's approval, that's when it's not going to work. That's when it's not going to succeed. And so you have to be really cautious about the energy that you're sending out into the world. Are you coming from a high vibrational place? Or are you coming from a place that's desperate and vulnerable? And some of us 6 sensories really can get into that desperate, vulnerable state, especially in our personal lives when we're thinking about getting married. We think about we want to have a family, and there's a timeline on that. Do you go and get some sort of birth control or surgery to stop yourself from having kids? Or the opposite, do you go and get some kind of treatment to make yourself more fertile? And these things are very personal decisions, but you have to really check your intention to ask, why am I making the choices that I'm making? Is it for my highest good? And that's especially important with medical decisions that are going to affect your personal life. Is this really optimal for my health and my well-being? Or am I putting too much power into the other person's hands and seeking their approval by being subservient to them? And I think as women, we're particularly vulnerable to this, but I've seen it sometimes in men too, where they're trying so hard to please a partner. Are you traveling to see your partner, for example, and sinking a lot of money into that? Or are you traveling at expense to speak for free at a conference? I'm not saying you can't do anything for free in business and you can't give without any strings attached in a relationship, but you have to be aware that 5 sensories value uncertainty and risk. So when you're working with them, the more security you give them by being willing to work for free or willing to travel to see them, the more likely they are to undervalue your time, your talent, and your services. So I'm not saying you can never do it. You know, if there's something unique and you want to travel to a specific place and meet certain people and you're willing to do that at your own expense, then maybe go for it. It may make sense. But in a lot of situations, you got to be really aware that you can get burned by doing these things at your own expense, and it may not pay off. And it's a very difficult lesson to learn in both business and in your personal life. You can learn all the marketing tools and really go after the approval of others, hoping that they're going to accept you. But it may not happen, you know. And so it's better to put yourself out there and allow other 5 sensories to come to you with their life lessons, with their questions. When you're able to do that and they're willing to pay you properly, you're much more likely to succeed long term.